Hi, everyone. Professor Z. I wanted to talk a little bit, one hopefully last final time, about the soda tax paper. So I turned those back to you, and I think some of you are probably going to want to revise, which is totally fine. And I just want to look at one paper that I think does a lot of things well that I think some of you will find useful as a model. So one of the things I noticed was that a lot of you had found it challenging just in terms of developing and structuring the paper. And what I mean by that is you had a hard time, not a hard, you went in and out of doing a good job of um, fully developing each paragraph and doing all the things in each paragraph that needed to be done. So I just want to look at what this paper did, um, because I think it'll help everyone think about what they need to do to improve or revise their papers. So if we look here at the intro, we're looking for three things, right? Do we have a hook? Do we have the background information? And do we have a thesis? The hook here is a quote from Men's Health magazine saying Philadelphia was named the fattest city in America. That came from one of our readings. And that's a good hook here. It gets us into it's going to bridge us into the soda tax, right? From there, they go into, in recent discussions of the soda tax, a controversial issue has been about obesity. What they next do is they introduce the readings that they're going to talk about in the paper. They talk about Marlowe and Shears, which is one reading, and Victoria Albert, which is the second reading. So this is the background. And they do a synthesis here. They say they all agree that soda and sugary drinks are not the only factors to obesity. That synthesis right there is going to pretty much be the topic sentence of the they say, and then the writer is going to develop that paragraph with reasons and evidence that show that that is in fact true, that those authors agree that soda or sugary drinks are not the only factors to obesity. From there, the writer briefly explains each of the readings a little bit more, and then they get into their thesis, which is basically a preview of their I say. They say, I agree that there are many other factors to obesity, and that by putting a tax on soda will not solve the problem of obesity. So that's previewing what's going to come in the I say, and that is the thesis. That's the claim of the paper. That's what the writer is going to argue, is that they agree. Okay, so that's a good introduction. Does all the things that we want to see done. Also, decent title too. Does the soda tax make a difference in obesity rates? Gets us thinking. Is that going to be true or not? Okay. Next paragraph is our they say. And what I want to point out first is just the topic sentence, which introduces both articles and performs the synthesis. It says all the authors are against the soda tax and believe it's not the only factor to obesity. Notice that this pretty much repeats the idea from the introduction, but that's okay because it's a key idea to the essay. What some of you did in your they says is in your first sentence or somewhere near the beginning, you didn't have a synthesis where you mentioned both readings. So you may have just, your paragraph, like the first half of the paragraph may have been about one reading, and then the second half of the paragraph may have been about the second reading. That's not great structure. You want to have a topic sentence that basically synthesizes both of the readings and says how they are in agreement or how they complement one another or how they disagree. Whatever the findings are of your synthesis, you want that stated up front. So I wanted to point out that this has a good topic sentence. Another thing that this writer did, I think, very well was they chose quotes that were very good summaries of key ideas from the readings, right? So, for example, here it is, the Victoria Albert reading. It's true consumer choice heavily influences obesity rates, but for low income and minority communities who make up a large portion of America is obese. The problem isn't an unwillingness to make good choices, but the absence of choice in any form. That captures a key point of Victoria Albert, and it's a point that is crucial to this synthesis, which is that access is something that's lacking in low income communities, which is a factor in obesity, even beyond the idea of sugar. Okay. So that's a nice choice of quote to summarize a key idea. And then notice after that how they use the templates. They say Albert's point, and then they're going to restate or paraphrase Albert's point, right? So they're doing the quotation sandwich here. So they're just doing the moves of academic writing, and they're doing them well. Same deal in later on in the same paragraph, right? Then they move into Marlowe and Shears, and I did just want to point out that that was another spot where, actually, it's another Victoria Albert quote that they get. It's just a good, nice job of choosing quotes. It's challenging to choose good quotes. This writer did a good job at it. It says, in Victoria Albert's view, economic theory demonstrates that taxes focused on one product, such as soda, will lead consumers to purchase substitutes. So, and then they go on to explain that. Basically, Albert is saying, and they just paraphrase it. So they're doing a nice job of choosing quotes. Did a nice job overall with the synthesis. Kept it nice and clean. Just 2 readings, a few quotes from Albert. I think there was one from Marlowe and Shears, and the quotes that they chose hit on the key points from the readings that they wanted to synthesize. And that's all you had to do there. Next, they move into their I say, which is where they're going to explain if they agree or disagree or whatever they're about to do. It could also be a little bit of both. And in this case, the writer says, I've always believed that drinking soda was the main reason for gaining weight and obesity, but I've realized that there are more factors that cause weight gain and obesity. And what they do here is they use the example of their uncle. So it's a personal story that connects to the material, and they go into specific details about their uncle and the things that their uncle dealt with weight gain and obesity. And they talk about his use of soda and his use of other things such as the gym or exercise or drinking water and stuff. Overall, like, this paragraph did a good job of having a clear topic sentence and then specific supporting evidence from their lives. There were a few places where they probably could have given like some more detail, but generally it was a pretty strong job of being persuasive in their I say. There was one spot I could show it to you. Let's see. So here, towards the end of the paragraph, it says, according to Marlowe and Shears, soda tax advocates seem to believe that a soda tax will lead to more water and diet drink consumption, but it is likely that substitutions into other products with caloric properties similar to soda will arise. And what they didn't do after this quote is connect it to their uncle. So like the thing to do here would have been to say how this relates to what their uncle chose to do. And then it would have been a good connection here. So I think they were probably heading in that direction and maybe just didn't think, just didn't wrap up the connection. Anyway, so the I say is pretty decent. Last point here, last body paragraph, here's your counter argument, okay? And they did a nice job on this. This was something that I think a lot of people struggled with because it's probably the first time you've written a counter argument, okay? But what I want to point out is they lay out the opposition and then they rebut it. They do the rebuttal, right? So in the first 4 lines here, they say, here's what some people would say. Soda tax advocates and the government would object that it won't reduce obesity. These people will argue that the reason that many people are obese is due to soda and other sugary drinks, right? Now, here's how they respond, right? So they've laid out the counter argument. This is what people would say in response to me. And then they say, though I concede, right? So a concession is good. You're saying, hey, all right, they've got a point in certain situations. I'll give them that, right? They say, I concede that they can put a tax on soda to help reduce obesity, but I still maintain it's not a solution to obesity, okay? And then they explain why it's not a solution, right? If they're putting a tax on soda because they believe that it causes obesity and health problems, that means they should put a tax on everything else that causes people to be overweight. So they point out an inconsistency in their opponent's argument, and they use that to maintain their own argument and to uphold and reaffirm their own argument. So this was, it's short and sweet. It's only about 10 lines. It's a perfectly good counter argument. They lay out the opposition's argument, and then they do a short concession, which shows that you're reasonable and that you're willing to entertain other viewpoints. And then they follow that up with by maintaining their own point. Okay. Conclusion, right? They need to restate their thesis, add something new, either predict the future, point to the larger implications, or solve the problem, and then they should bookend their hook, right? It looks like let's just look at it quickly, right? When discussing the tax, we have some people that will say it will help reduce obesity, and we have some that argue it will not. In conclusion, here's a restatement of their point. There are more factors to obesity besides soda. For example, lack of exercise, not eating healthy, not having a choice but to eat unhealthy due to access, etc., etc. If we stay focused, here they're providing what looks like a solution, right? If we stay focused on the idea that soda tax is the lone factor in obesity, Philadelphia will not be the fattest city in the will not be the only fattest city in the country. So this is nice. They bookended. They came back to the quote they had at the beginning, right? They say if we stay focused on the idea that the soda tax is the lone factor to obesity, Philadelphia will not be the only fattest city in the country. In other words, they're pointing to the larger implications and they're bookending their hook at the same time. They're saying like it's going to happen all across the country. Everyone's going to be the fattest city because this is not the solution. Okay, so they're pointing to larger implications, not doing a solution. But this was a nice job, right? In a really short space, they managed to do just a concise conclusion that wraps up the paper, brings us back to the beginning and the book-ended hook. So, overall, the paper was structurally solid. They did a nice job with quotes. And they're making the moves in each paragraph that they need to make to be an effective writer in that paragraph. So as some of you go to revise, keep in mind some of the lessons here of what you got to do in each of the paragraphs, and look at the feedback that I gave you on your grade sheet, look at the feedback that I gave you on your essay to help you to do the revisions. For some of you, it's simply like adding pieces, right? Like, oh, you left out a thesis. Oh, you didn't bookend the hook. Or, oh, you left out a counter argument. So you've got to build those into your essays because that's going to strengthen your essays, okay? So good luck revising this week, and I look forward to reading those revisions next week. Have a good week.